In 1970, Black History Month was first marked for celebration during the month of February. Ever since, there's been countless programs, discussions, historical facts, and even food events to highlight Black culture. But what about Black history here in Maine? There's so much to unpack, but I wanted to talk about that with an awesome individual who not only paved the way for the future generations to come, but made it their mission to never forget Black history. First, I'll introduce you to Bob Greene. Let's get to know his story, his why, and how it all started in Cumberland County, Maine.
It's never bothered me being around others and trying to learn from others.
Historian and retired journalist Bob Greene was born in 1936, and his family roots date back in Maine from 1750.
I'm at least the 8th generation of my family to be born in Cumberland County, Maine. My dad is one of 10, I think. Mom is one of 12. Dad is next to the baby. Mom is the 4th oldest. And Dad's family out in Kansas City were quite middle class, if not upper middle.
Bob went to Portland High School and graduated in 1953. Although he loved history and writing, music is how he began his journalism career.
I wrote for the Portland High School newspaper, and I covered, I had a music column. I've always been involved with music. I don't play, but I am proud of the fact that when I was in high school, I put the first R&B record on a jukebox in Portland, and it was Ruth Brown's 5, 10, 15. You're not familiar with that one? I don't think anybody ever sat down and said you can be anything you want to be, but I never heard you can't do this, you can't do that, until I got in college. And my dad from Kansas City says, Blacks aren't in journalism. Later on, he told me that he was very, very impressed with what had happened to my career. And
how did that make you feel?
Oh, very good, yeah.
So now you know a little bit about Bob Greene. Coming up on TV5 News at 6, we'll learn more about his journey to becoming a journalist in the 1960s and how his historical findings had more of a connection to him than he thought. Back to you. Welcome back to our first Black History Month special on historian and retired journalist Bob Greene. Earlier, we gave you a glimpse at his upbringing here in Maine. We talked about his love for music and how that led him to becoming a journalist. Now we'll share with you his journey breaking down barriers in the 1960s and how his historical findings led him to learn a lot more about his family.
Went to court for
Bob Greene graduated from Portland High School in 1953 as one of the 4 Black students enrolled at the time. He went on to study journalism at Virginia State, which is the nation's first state-supported historically Black college. And during that time, he wanted more of a challenge, and that was certainly met.
My second semester was when Brown versus Board of Ed came down, and I'm living in Petersburg, Virginia, in a segregated area. Yeah.
He then went on to study at the University of Kansas and later landed a job.
One night I was working at this little Black weekly newspaper in Indianapolis, Indiana, and it was the night we went to bed, the night that we put everything together to print the paper. And while we were basically in the print shop putting the paper together, the radio was on, and they came out and said that in Mississippi they had found this body of Emmett Till. And I remember writing the story in type and making it the front page.
After writing many stories before and during the Civil Rights Movement, Bob later wrote for the Associated Press. He even took on sports and wrote about tennis, witnessing the handsome eight. And you can tell by his fit he's a big U.S. Open fan, and who wouldn't be after attending the last 44 consecutive tournaments? But Bob was approached by his oldest son, who asked about their family history. That led him to learning about his own family, who had moved and worked here in Maine for generations. It also led him to discovering a black man who was a hotel owner in 1860 in Eastport, and so much more.
The first black we know by name to have been in what is now Maine was Matuda Costa. And he was here in 1608. Not unusual. And also what I found interesting is that he was the interpreter for the French. And there are other things all up and down you'll hear. The history of black folks.
More research on black history in Maine continued. In fact, he wrote a book called Maine Roots versus the Manuel, Matthews, Ruby family, which includes ties to his family tree. When asked about why he dedicated his life's work to storytelling and revealing history, this is what he had to say.
It's fun finding out why. We need to really understand our past, just to understand that we're not as different as we keep saying we are, or somebody says we are. The Irish, the Italians, the Polish, the French Canadians, and now the Somalians, they all have been a problem when they first arrived and gone through the same thing. And they all, when you look back at them, they all have added to this tapestry that we call life.
So if you didn't know before today, you now know Bob Greene, one of the many black journalists from Maine who paved the way for so many. Next week, we'll dive into a story about an incredible black woman who attended the University of Maine and was crowned queen for a special occasion. Back to you.